Overnight, hundreds of people staged this protest outside a Rochdale police station after this video was shared online, showing a police officer kicking and stamping a man in the head. Now, we have to warn you, this footage is disturbing, although we have edited it because of the time of day. Greater Manchester Police have responded now. They say this event is truly shocking and that people are rightly concerned. So let's go to the former Met Superintendent Leroy Logan, who's obviously seen the unedited footage, which is very disturbing to look at. It's like the kind of thing you see coming out of America, isn't it, Mr. Logan? What's your immediate take on it?
Well, I'm really disturbed by the actions of the officer. I mean, every officer has to be as calm and collective as possible, and especially firearms officers. They're normally very well trained, extremely cool under pressure, because they have to do psychometric testing and all sorts of stress-related training on a regular basis. So to see him going in to really violent actions, and the person on the floor poses no risk. There's no weapons that I could see. There's no form of aggressive behavior, laying flat on the ground. And the first thing he does is to kick them in the head and stamp on their head, and then go heavily and kneeing them in the back. And it doesn't stop there. He actually goes on to another person after a couple of minutes. And that person is compliant, hands on the head, and he tells him to kneel. And then he assaults him by using his leg into his hip area, falls down. And he has actually got a taser. So he's actually showing the taser. So he's getting compliance, and there's no threat that I could see. And then he hits the person in the back of the head, the second person back of the head. So this is totally disproportionate, unnecessary, and definitely I'm not surprised that he's been taken off frontline duties, because he's a bit of a loose cannon.
It's absolutely fascinating to get your sort of forensic analysis from a professional point of view, Leroy. But just to put it into context, and if there is a context, is that 4 men, members of the public, obviously, those perhaps who were on the floor there and others, 4 men were arrested for various charges, including assault of an emergency worker and a fray. And in this incident, before this moment, 3 officers had already been assaulted. 1 female officer had suffered a broken nose. That is pretty extreme as well, isn't it? That kind of violence towards officers in a public space at sort of 8:30 in the evening at an airport. Is there anything in that situation that makes you think you can see how this escalated?
Yes, there's always context, I know. I've spoken to firearms officers, and I said to them, looking at that video, would you go in as heavy as that? And not one of them said, yeah, I'll kick him in the head. I mean, I don't think the officer intentionally went into that, but he just lost his head. That's the problem. He just, something seemed to snap in him. Right. I mean, I look at the murder of Lee Rigby and the firearms officers who responded to those 2 suspects who they must have heard on the radio what had happened to Lee Rigby, and they were just walking around, obviously wanted death by police, martyrdom by police. And those firearms officers went in very controlled. All right, they shot them, but there wasn't, didn't shoot them dead. So even under the worst provocations, officers who are trained very highly and to have the right aptitude for this sort of work has to be seen to be in control. Difficult as it may be, but they're trained to do that. And that is what's absolutely necessary. Right. And disproportionate, unnecessary actions only undermines all the great work that other firearms officers and wider patrol officers do on a daily basis.
All right, just one brief question before we say goodbye to you, Leroy. It was suggested, certainly on some news networks last night, and this was coming from the officers, that they were very worried that they were going to be disarmed by this group of men who were behaving violently. I mean, they had their guns with them, and they were very concerned about that. And it was being offered as a reason for putting that guy down and keeping him down.
Keeping him down, yes. Especially the first person. they were laying flat on the ground. And it wasn't like it was only one or two officers. There was a team of officers, and each were taking a person, and there were other officers on watch to make sure that no one's creeping up behind the contact officers. So the observing officers, and they had the contact officers. But that first officer looked at the person lying flat. His assessment is there risk? I couldn't see any risk.
Yeah.
Okay. There was no form of weapon. Yeah. And then he goes and takes that really excessive action.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it'll all come out, won't it, in the inquiry?
And a Greater Manchester Police spokesperson has told us that officers were called to reports of an altercation between members of the public in Terminal 2 at Manchester Airport whilst attempting to arrest one of the suspects of the earlier altercation. 3 officers were subject to a violent assault where they were punched to the ground. A female officer suffered a broken nose. All 3 were taken to hospital. 3 of the officers, I believe, were taken to hospital for treatment. As the attending officers were firearm officers, there was a clear risk during this assault of their firearms being taken from them, as you said. 4 men were arrested at the scene for a fray and assault on emergency service workers. This is still their statement. We acknowledge the concerns of the conduct within the video, and our Professional Standards Directorate are assessing this. Leroy, thank you so much.
You,
it's invaluable to have that X-ray vision, isn't it, from a professional point of view. Thank you so much. Caroline, Salma, good morning to both of you.
Should we talk about Trump?
Should we? Yes.
I mean, after he was very nearly killed, in his first comments publicly, he said that from now on it was going to be unity, bringing the country together. Well, let's have a look at what he had to say last night about the woman who's clearly emerging as the front runner to take him on in the coming election.
Sleepy, crooked Joe Biden or laughing Kamala? Crooked Joe Biden. So now we have a new victim to defeat. Lion Kamala Harris. Lion. L-Y-I-N apostrophe.
And interestingly, he deliberately mispronounces her name as well, just for good measure. He's rattled by her, isn't he?
I think he is rattled because we've had a game changer, haven't we, from last week when I was on this programme last Friday. Yeah. Biden has gone, and obviously he made his announcement on television to every American in the early hours of our morning, but yesterday. And it is a game changer because, Biden's no longer in play. We've got a new candidate. She's younger. I think she's brought an energy to it. And actually, it's the polls that count. Already, a lot can happen in the next 100 days.
She's making ground.
But already,
at the polls,
I think it's Reuters and Ipsos said she's 2% ahead. So
2 points ahead, yeah.
And last week, it was everyone saying, if Biden's going to be the candidate, it's a done deal for Trump. So I think, he might be very... very confident in his statements, but behind that, suddenly it's changed.
Well,
it's a different type of election campaign.
I know that clearly, up until now, she's been pretty much an unknown quantity, because that's the nature of being a vice president. You basically keep a low profile. But I have to say, I was really impressed with one of her first speeches where she identified the fact that she used to be a prosecutor and that she used to prosecute sexual offenders and fraudsters. And she basically turned to camera and looked straight down the lens and said, "So, Mr. Trump, I know your type."
Yeah,
now, that's much
strong.
sharper than anything Biden could have come up with.
Well, funnily enough, that's kind of Trump's playbook, isn't it? And that's what you see when he talks about crooked Hillary, sleepy Joe, and now lying Kamala. He goes for the...
Kamala, by the way. We finally established it. It's Kamala.
Oh, this is contrary to other evidence that I have seen about Kamala.
No, we all thought it was Kamala because she wrote in her autobiography that it rhymed with comma. But the Americans, of course, don't say comma like we say, here's a comma. They say, here's a comma. So it's actually, honestly, we checked.
OK.
It's
Kamala.
Kamala. Think comma, chameleon, and you're there.
Right.
OK.
Brilliant. That's what we're going to use. In any case, the problem with this is that she's now playing the personality game in the same way that Trump does, right? And they're undermining each other. And it's smarter for her to do that. She's not going to go totally statesmanlike, because that's not what her opponent is. But at the moment, they're going for each other. As you say, she's coming back. She's closing the polls. He obviously is going to attack. But the unity point for Trump, I think, is a different one. It's not about being nice to your opponent, because that's just not how he works. It is about not moving himself so far to the right that he puts off other people that could necessarily be in his core vote.
Gotcha.
So, neutralising language around abortion, which a lot of people do not like in the States. Neutralising language around insurrection or fighting. That's why he came with the unity thing again. But I think this is going to be much more interesting, much more entertaining than the Biden versus
But it would be entertaining
Trump.
if they debated one another. From what I read, Trump has said he won't debate her.
Oh, really? Well,
Yeah.
there you go. And that's another interesting, because before he wanted to debate Biden all the time. You know,
Yes.
you couldn't get enough of wanting to debate Biden. And now it shows. And I get what you're saying about, you know, I think it was a really strong statement by Kamala. But actually, she did it in a way which was clever.
Yes,
She was
I agree.
able to say to the American people, I'm a professional. I have prosecuted. I have done this job. And I think that with that came a certain authenticity, but also she was putting out her expertise as well. And actually it was and there was a slight joke in it, people smiled,
Yes.
which isn't the same, I think, as Trump's vicious attacks, I think. I mean, he just viciously attacks Biden.
There's no humour
continues to
there,
do
is
so.
there?
There's no humour. You know, it's all, and he can't take a joke against himself either. There's no self-deprecation.
The thin
within
skin
Trump.
is regularly on show,
And
yeah.
that, if she can prod,
Right.
you know, prod the bear or whatever the phrase is.
Poke the bear.
Poke the bear, that's it. I think it could get some interesting
Shall we have a look,
reactions.
shall we have a little look at yesterday's man, who, of course, is still the President of the United States, and after a long period of silence, quite a few days, he made an address to the American people last night, where for the first time he sort of did acknowledge that age might be the issue. Let's have a look.
So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. That's the best way to unite our nation. You know, there is a time and a place for long years of experience in public life. But there's also a time and a place for new voices, fresh voices, yes, younger voices. And that time and place is now.
What do we think about the claim, and not just from the Republicans, that if he's not basically fit to run for office in another 4 years, and he's had to withdraw now because everyone's seen the problems that he's got, should he really be in the White House at all? Should he be resigning now?
What, right now?
Right
I mean,
now, yeah.
well, the problem is your VP is now going to be on the ticket to become president, so I don't think it's practical or helpful. What I found astounding about that statement is that it's as if magically, somehow, we all didn't know that his health was declining and that he wasn't, you know, into his 80s and having a difficult time and struggling. I think it's the height of selfishness for him not to have gone sooner, or at least after his first term, run a proper process to have a different candidate, because this is just, the whole thing is embarrassing.